Now, family, let's step directly into the clinical science of what is happening under the surface. While mild, manageable discomfort from structural shedding can be a normal part of your body's natural cleansing process, debilitating sharp period pain that halts your life is completely abnormal. I want to say this clearly to everyone listening. If your cramps are forcing you to call out from work, miss school, or cancel your social commitments, your body is waving a massive biological red flag. It is telling you that your internal soil is highly compromised by systemic disruptors. When we look at the molecular landscape of the menstruating body, the ultimate driver of severe pain isn't the physical shedding. It is the excessive, unchecked production of inflammatory chemical messengers. Let's look at the hard science of the major systemic traps driving this chemical storm.
They been cramping my style all week. Craving chocolate trees, checking pants, checking seeds, sipping herbal tea and fight for menstrual equity. Hey, I kick Cramps ass. 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 You're now tuned in to the Kick Cramps Ass podcast with your host, Brittany Walker, advocating for menstrual equity, period poverty, and womb wellness. New episodes on Menstruation Mondays.
Happy Menstruation Monday. Welcome back to the Kick Cramps Ass podcast, where we treat language as a clinical weapon and biological data as our absolute currency. I am your host, Brittany Walker, and today is July 20th, and we are stepping directly into the trenches of a conversation that affects millions of menstruators every single month, yet remains deeply misunderstood. We are talking about period pain, but we are moving far past the generic lazy summaries you hear in mainstream media. We are breaking this down into definitive structural and biochemical mechanics, shedding versus cramping. Family, for generations, society has taught us to collapse all menstrual discomfort into one big inevitable bucket called cramps. We've been conditioned to accept an eroded quality of life, to pop NSAIDs or over-the-counter medicine like candy, and just to push through a pain that can feel completely debilitating. But I am drawing a hard line today. Knowledge is power, and educating yourself will always be your absolute best resource. To truly command your biological authority, you have to know what is actually hurting inside of your pelvis. There is a profound mechanical and chemical difference between the dull, heavy sensations of your uterine lining, physically shedding, and the sharp, agonizing inflammatory contractions of true cramping. And guess what? This discomfort doesn't show up just on day one of your bleed. For many of us, it spans a massive 3-week window, creeping up during the week leading up to your period, spiking through the menstrual phase, and sometimes lingering slightly after your period ends. Today, we are going to give you the exact clinical vocabulary and biological markers to decipher this pain, audit the systemic disruptors causing it, and design a holistic infrastructure to downregulate the inflammation once and for all. Now, to center our minds, let's move into our I am power statement for today. We like to kick off each episode with the I am power statement, with I representing inspiration, A representing affirmations, and M representing manifestations. And the I am power statement for today is, I am completely attuned to the subtle language of my pelvis. I refuse to normalize debilitating pain. I possess the clinical literacy to decode my body's data trail. And I command the biological authority to soothe inflammation and reclaim my physical peace. Now, before we dive in, we're going to go ahead and take a sip of our good old cramp elixir. We're going to cut to our first commercial break, and we will be right back with you. Tired of clunky remote recordings? Level up with Riverside FM Pro. Get studio quality audio and video, effortless editing with powerful AI tools, and seamless live streaming and collaboration. Become a pro of Riverside.fm and unlock the full potential of your content. Sign up today and make your voice heard. Visit the link in the description of this episode to discover more. Now, back to the show. Welcome back from that commercial break. We hope that you enjoyed it. Now let's map out the physical sensations. I want you to close your eyes if you are in a safe place. To do so, take a deep breath and mentally place your absolute undivided awareness right into your pelvic bowl. We need to structurally differentiate the two distinct mechanisms occurring simultaneously during your interwinter or your menstrual phase. We have what you call the menstrual pain matrix. Too often, we collapse all pelvic discomfort into a single word, pain. But when we look at the menstrual pain matrix, we see a profound divergence in what your body is experiencing. We are looking at a dual action phenomenon. Mechanism 1 is shedding and mechanism 2 is cramping. They have entirely different cellular causes. They express distinct physical sensations and they demand completely different lifestyle responses. Let's isolate them one by one. Now let's start with the sheer structural physics of your cycle, the mechanics of shedding, the biomarker deep dive. Shedding is an entirely mechanical, architectural, and structural process. It is the natural, healthy clearing of the soil. Towards the end of your luteal phase, if fertilization hasn't occurred, your corpus luteum degrades, causing progesterone and estrogen to plummet down to your absolute baseline. This hormonal withdrawal signals the spiral arteries, the tiny coiled blood vessels that feed the thick endometrial lining, to sharply constrict. Now, as these vessels clamp shut, it temporarily restricts local blood and oxygen supply to the outermost layer of the endometrium, the stratum functionale. Without oxygen, this tissue layer undergoes a controlled separation process, gently loosening its grip from the deeper muscular uterine wall, which we call the myometrium. This is pure structural mechanics. Your body is physically detaching a vascular layer of tissue. It requires cellular energy, or ATP, to manage this tissue separation and safely process it down through the narrow opening of the cervix. Now, the exact sensation matrix. Because this is a macroscopic structural event, it does not manifest as a sharp poke. Instead, it feels like a deep, heavy, diffuse fullness. It is a dull, radiating ache that commands the entire real estate of your pelvic basin. You might feel it as a literal downward pulling sensation in the lower abdomen, almost as if your pelvis is carrying extra weight because anatomically it is. This structural weight and tissue movement pulls slightly on the local broad ligaments and nerve pathways, causing the sensation to radiate backward into your sacrum and downward into your upper thighs. It is the slow, steady, normal physical weight of tissue shifting, compressing, and preparing to exit the body. Let's talk about strategy. Structural shedding does not need to be blocked or suppressed. It needs to be facilitated. Shedding aggressively requires active vascular flow, physical pelvic space, and optimized downward somatic energy, what ancient Eastern movement systems call apana vayu, the downward moving force of elimination. When you feel this deep, heavy ache, it responds beautifully to gentle, low impact movement like pelvic rocks, targeted warmth from a castor oil pack, or hot water bottle to dilate local vessels and structural decompression. Your goal here is to open the pelvic bowl, create geometric space in the hips, and let gravity do the work for you. Now, let's pivot across the matrix to the true villain of the menstrual experience, the mechanics of cramping, the biomarker deep dive. Now, true debilitating cramping is not caused by the physical tissue separating from the wall. Debilitating cramping is an acute chemical inflammatory crisis driven by lipid compounds called prostaglandins, specifically known as prostaglandin PGF2 alpha. As your endometrial cells break down during the shedding process, they naturally release these lipids directly into the local uterine tissue. Now, prostaglandins do serve an evolutionary purpose. In a healthy baseline amount, they act as chemical messengers that tell the smooth muscle fibers of your uterus to contract. These microcontractions are designed to gently squeeze the local blood vessels and help pump the shed tissue out through the cervical canal. However, when your system is primed for inflammation, prostaglandin levels spike abnormally high. When this happens, they don't cause gentle pumping. They cause the smooth muscle of the uterus to go into violent, uncoordinated, hypertonic spasms. These intense, erratic contractions elevate intrauterine pressure far beyond normal baselines. The uterus squeezes so tightly that it completely crushes its own internal blood vessels, cutting off the oxygen supply to the uterine muscle tissue itself. This state of localized oxygen starvation is a process called ischemia. Mechanically, this is the exact same physiological process that happens to a heart muscle during a heart attack. Your uterine muscle is literally suffocating, starving for oxygenated blood, and screaming out via your pain receptors. Now, the exact sensation matrix. Because this is a chemical ischemic event, it feels completely different from shedding. This is the sharp, stabbing, white-hot, spasmodic pain that completely robs you of your breath and forces you to double over in agony. It is unpredictable, coming in waves of intense clenching pressure. And because prostaglandins are highly fluid molecules, they don't stay neatly contained inside the uterus. They leak into the surrounding tissues and enter the bloodstream. When they travel backward, they cause acute blinding lower back spasms. When they migrate to your digestive tract, they interact with the smooth muscle of your intestines, causing them to hypercontract, which is the exact clinical reason why you experience sudden pre-period diarrhea and stomach upset. When the systemic prostaglandin surge hits the central nervous system, it triggers full body signs of shock, including sudden nausea, dizziness, and cold, clammy sweats. Now, what it biologically requires. Let's be entirely clear. True cramping does not need space or time to pass. It requires an immediate, aggressively anti-inflammatory intervention, rapid smooth muscle relaxation, and a downregulation of your sympathetic nervous system. You have to break this ischemic cycle by forcing the smooth muscle to release its grip so oxygenated blood can rush back into the tissue. To truly master this, beautiful beings, you have to stop looking at your period as an isolated 3-day event. You have to track how these twin mechanisms of shedding and cramping manifest across 3 distinct phases of your monthly calendar. Phase 1, the week leading up, the late luteal window. In the 5 to 7 days before your bleed even begins, prostaglandins are already quietly accumulating in the uterine tissues. If your internal uterine is operating under a state of estrogen dominance, meaning you have high, thick tissue proliferation, and low, insufficient progesterone, the molecular inflammatory cascade builds early. You will start to feel pre-period cramping, a distinct sense of heavy pelvic congestion, fluid retention, and a dull, constant tightness in your lower back. This is your warning sign that the chemical storm is gathering before a single drop of blood has appeared. And then you have phase 2, during the actual menstrual phase while you're bleeding. This is the epicenter of the matrix, the mechanical structural shedding of the tissue and the chemical prostaglandin-driven cramping peak at the exact same time. If your lifestyle, stress levels, and nutritional choices have left your prostaglandin synthesis completely unchecked, this is the window where severe multi-hour uterine ischemia takes place. The physical weight of the shedding lining collides with the oxygen-starved spasms of the muscle, creating the peak crisis window that so many menstruators dread. And then phase 3, slightly after your period, which is in the earlier follicular window. Have you ever noticed that your period has completely stopped? The bleed is gone, but you still have a lingering deep structural ache or a weird tightness in your pelvis for 2 or 3 days after your period ends. Beautiful beings, if pain lingers after the bleed concludes, it is almost never due to prostaglandins or shedding. What you are experiencing is residual pelvic floor hypertonicity. Because your uterus spent the last several days convulsing and locking up from intense cramping, the surrounding skeletal muscles of your pelvic floor went into a protective involuntary guarding reflex. They clenched to protect the area from pain, and now they are structurally locked in a chronic, tight, hypertonic state. They forgot how to let go. Now, knowledge is power, and educating yourself will always be your absolute best resource. Now you can look at the calendar and look at your body through the precise clinical lens. You can see that your period pain isn't a random curse. It is a highly predictable phase-based physiological sequence that we can map, intercept, and fundamentally change. Now take a moment and let all of that valuable information sit in. We're going to go ahead and cut to our next commercial break, and we will be right back with you. Periods got you down? Kick cramps to the curb with Pilates for periods. Our online program combines targeted Pilates, soothing yoga, calming meditation, and breathwork to help you manage your menstrual cycle naturally. Feel stronger, calmer, and more in control. Reclaim your comfort. Visit Pilates for Periods YouTube page, linked in the description of this episode, and start your journey to a more manageable cycle today. Now, back to the show. Welcome back from that commercial break. We hope that you enjoyed it. Now, family, let's step directly into the clinical science of what is happening under the surface. While mild, manageable discomfort from structural shedding can be a normal part of your body's natural cleansing process, debilitating sharp period pain that halts your life is completely abnormal. I want to say this clearly to everyone listening. If your cramps are forcing you to call out from work, miss school, or cancel your social commitments, your body is waving a massive biological red flag. It is telling you that your internal soil is highly compromised by systemic disruptors. When we look at the molecular landscape of the menstruating body, the ultimate driver of severe pain isn't the physical shedding. It is the excessive, unchecked production of inflammatory chemical messengers. Let's look at the hard science of the three major systemic traps driving this chemical storm. First up is the endocrine trap of the estrogen dominance and uterine proliferation. Let's understand the architectural baseline here. Estrogen is the magnificent hormone responsible for building and proliferating the uterine lining during your follicular phase. But in our modern environment, it is incredibly easy for estrogen to remain unchecked, staying completely out of balance with progesterone during the luteal phase. Now, what causes this? It's driven by poor hepatic clearance, meaning your liver is sluggish and overloaded, unable to properly methylate and pack away spent hormones. It is driven by an unbalanced gut estroblome, where an overgrowth of bad bacteria secretes an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, uncoupling bound estrogen and recirculating it right back into your bloodstream. And it is driven by daily exposure to environmental xenoestrogens, those synthetic chemical mimics found in our plastics, personal care items, and household products. Now, when you are trapped in a state of estrogen dominance, the endometrial lining doesn't just grow, it undergoes hyperproliferation. Now, it grows excessively thick, highly dense, and overvascularized. When it comes time for your inner winter or your menstrual cycle, a thicker lining structurally translates to a massive disproportionate amount of tissue that has to break down. When those cells rupture, they release a massive catastrophic surge of prostaglandins into the pelvic environment. More prostaglandins directly equals more violent, uncoordinated uterine spasms. The thicker the wall you build, the bigger the dynamite your body requires to clear out. And then the second systemic trap is entirely nutritional: the omega ratio and diet-induced inflammation. Beautiful beings, your body does not pull prostaglandins out of thin air. These lipid compounds are synthesized directly from the fatty acids stored inside your cellular membranes. Now, the raw materials you put into your mouth directly dictate the chemical properties of the inflammation your body produces. Now, let's look at the biochemical synthesis. The highly aggressive pro-inflammatory type of prostaglandin, prostaglandin PGF2 alpha, is derived from an omega-6 fatty acid known as arachidonic acid. Now, if your daily nutritional infrastructure is dominant in industrial seed oils, highly processed foods, and conventional factory farmed meats, your cell membranes become saturated with omega 6s. Simultaneously, if your diet is severely depleted of anti inflammatory omega 3 fatty acids like EPA and DHA found in wild caught seafood and high quality marine oils, your chemical equilibrium shifts. When your body goes to initiate a muscle contraction on day one, it looks at its cellular inventory, sees as absolute monopoly of omega 6 arachidonic acid, and naturally manufactures highly aggressive, incredibly inflammatory prostaglandins. You are essentially pouring gasoline onto a localized structural fire. Your diet is providing the raw building blocks for the exact chemical compounds that cause your blood vessels to choke out their oxygen supply. And the third trap is a beautiful intersection of psychology and structural biology, pelvic floor ischemia, and hypotonicity. We cannot talk about the uterus without talking about the autonomic nervous system. Chronic psychosocial stress, unmanaged anxiety, and systemic burnout lock your body into a perpetual sympathetic fight or flight state. Behaviorally, how does your body respond to chronic stress? It clenches. We unconsciously grip our jaws, we shrug our shoulders, and most destructively, we grip and tighten our deep pelvic floor muscles. This chronic structural tension turns your pelvic basin into a hypertonic restricted environment. This constant muscular clenching pinches local capillaries and restricts microvascular blood flow, creating a baseline state of hypoxia, low oxygen in the pelvis weeks before your period even begins. Now, when your inner winter arrives and the uterus attempts to contract, it is trying to pump blood through an environment that is already locked up, starved for oxygen, and structurally tight. The contracting uterus collides with a rigid hypertonic wall of pelvic floor muscles, and the resulting pain signals are amplified exponentially to your brain. Now, let's talk about the clinical data baseline. Let's ground this entirely in peer-reviewed clinical data so you can carry the science with absolute authority. A comprehensive study exploring the precise molecular biology of dysmenorrhea, which is heavy menstrual cramps, gynecological research concluded with this powerful finding. Elevated concentrations of endometrial prostaglandins, specifically PGF2 alpha, directly correlate with increased intrauterine pressure and uterine ischemia, serving as the primary driver of severe spasmodic pain rather than the structural shedding of the endometrium itself. Let that clinical reality sink deep into your awareness, family. The debilitating pain you feel is not an inevitable byproduct of the structural shedding. The shedding is just tissue separating. The agony is a direct result of an inflammatory chemical storm driving uterine ischemia, literally suffocating the muscle. And because a chemical storm is driven by systemic inputs, it means it could be fundamentally shifted, downregulated, and reversed through targeted strategic lifestyle changes. Now, we've said it twice already, but we're going to say it for a third time. Knowledge is power, family, and understanding this pathway is your very first step towards total health sovereignty. Turn this data into your defense. So, knowing what we know about the distinct pathways of shedding versus cramping, the ultimate question shifts from passive management to proactive execution. How do we actually build an active daily infrastructure to soothe the structural shedding and completely neutralize the chemical cramping? We refuse to play defense anymore. We move past merely tolerating passive symptoms, and we apply targeted biological-driven holistic interventions to rewrite our internal chemistry. Now, here are 3 pillars of your anti-inflammatory infrastructure. Our first line of defense is the nutritional prostaglandin blockade. If we want to change the output, we must fundamentally alter the raw materials our body has access to. We have to strategically starve the pro-inflammatory prostaglandin pathway. So, protocol. You need to consciously flood your system with high-quality, ultra-pure omega-3 fatty acids containing concentrated doses of EPA and DHA. This simple acts to displace the inflammatory omega-6 fats inside your cell membranes, ensuring that when your uterus goes to build prostaglandins, it builds the cool anti-inflammatory series 3 type instead of the white-hot PGF2 alpha. Now, next, your kitchen pharmacy. Concurrently during the week leading up to your period, your late luteal phase, introduce therapeutic doses of organic ginger or potent freshly steeped ginger into your daily routine. Do not underestimate the power of this root. Clinical trials have repeatedly demonstrated the targeted ginger administration acts as a highly effective natural COX2 exhibitor. It safely and effectively blocks the specific cyclooxygenase enzyme that manufactures pro-inflammatory prostaglandins, giving you the exact same pain relieving mechanism as standard over-the-counter NSAIDs, but without regarding your delicate stomach lining or compromising your long-term gut health. Our second pillar targets the physical weight of tissue separation, somatic decompression, and pelvic realignment. If your tracking reveals that your primary discomfort is that deep, heavy, downward pulling sensation of structural shedding, you must respect your current biology. Do not force your body through high impact, explosive movements or intense cardiovascular training that forces your pelvic floor to constantly contract against gravity. Instead, transition into targeted somatic pelvic decompression. Lie flat on your back and elevate your legs onto a chair at a crisp 90-degree angle, or extend them vertically up a wall in the restorative yoga posture, Viparita Karani, or legs up the wall. By elevating your lower extremities, you immediately utilize the laws of physics and gravity to safely drain vascular and venous congestion out of the heavy pelvic bowl, relieving immediate mechanical pressure on your sacrum and uterine ligaments. Now pair this physical posture with deep, slow diaphragmic breathing. As you inhale, don't just expand your chest. Consciously send your breath all the way down past your belly, letting it expand the lowest loops of your pelvic floor. This conscious deep down training actively stretches and releases the hypertonic muscles, completely reversing the unconscious protective guarding reflex that locks your pelvis in a painful vice. You are creating geometric space for the shedding to occur effortlessly. And our third and final pillar is your ultimate weapon against the ischemic spasm: magnesium smooth muscle relaxation. When it comes to true sharp spasmodic cramping, magnesium glycinate is your absolute best biological resource. To stop a spasm, you have to look at how muscle cells clench. Muscle contractions require calcium to flood into the cellular space. Magnesium acts as a beautiful natural calcium channel blocker. When your system is saturated with magnesium, it safely binds to the cellular gates, preventing calcium from overstimulating the smooth muscle walls of your uterus. This directly stops the violent hypertonic contractions in their tracks, allowing oxygenated blood to immediately reperfuse the starving uterine tissue. Now, do not wait until you are already doubling over on day one to think about magnesium. You need to proactively load your cellular stores. Start supplementing with Start consuming high quality, high bioavailable magnesium glycinate during your late luteal phase, the week leading up to your bleed. Pair this internal support with regular warm Epsom salt baths. The transdermal absorption of magnesium combined with the hydrothermal heat works wonders to downregulate your sympathetic nervous system, melt away pelvic muscle guarding, and lock in a state of deep systemic physical peace before the first drop of blood ever arrives. Now, as we let all of this valuable information set in, we are going to cut to our final commercial break, and we will be right back with you.
Fly. Do you want? Yeah. Fly. Do you want to fly? Let go of all the things that hold you down. Used to be so easy.
Now, back to the show. Welcome back from that commercial break. We hope that you enjoyed it. Now, beautiful beings, as we close out this deep structural roadmap today, let's take a collective deep breath and let all of this information settle into the body. Taking one deep inhalation in through your nostrils and one exhalation out of our mouths. We have covered an incredible amount of biological ground today. But if there is one core truth I want you to take and carry with you out of this masterclass, it is this: your pain is a data trail, not a permanent diagnosis. You are not broken, you are not designed poorly, and you absolutely do not have to live your life at the mercy of a cycle that forces you to double over in silence. Let's do a quick high yield recap of what we decoded today so you can carry this clinical literacy into your week. First, shedding is mechanical. That deep, heavy downward pulling sensation is the physical weight of your uterine lining beautifully separating and clearing out the soil. It isn't a crisis. It's a structural cleansing process that simply requires geometric pelvic space, gravity, and dilating warmth to let your body flow effortlessly. Cramping is chemical. That sharp, blinding, white hot spasm that robs you of your breath is an inflammatory prostaglandin surge suffocating your uterine tissue via ischemia. Because it is a chemical storm driven by inputs like estrogen dominance, poor liver clearance, and an unbalanced omega fat ratio, it can be systematically intercepted and turned down. And then finally, track the 3 phases. Pay attention to the gathering storm in the week leading up to your period, support your body through the structural and chemical peak during the bleed, and address the residual pelvic floor tightness that can linger slightly after your period ends. Now, our final time for this episode. Knowledge is power, family, and educating yourself will always be your absolute best resource. You now possess the clinical vocabulary and the physiological roadmap to stop playing defense. When you feel the heavy ache, decompress. When you feel the sharp spasm, execute your anti-inflammatory blockade. You command the biological authority to change your internal terrain. Now, if this episode upgraded your health literacy, gave you validation, and handed you the tools to stop normalizing debilitating pain, please hit that subscribe button. Leave us a 5-star like or a written review on whichever platform you are listening from, and share this audio or video with a loved one who is tired of suffering through their bleed. Let's change the collective narrative together. Also, subscribe to our Pilates for Periods YouTube page, join our newsletter, and stay deeply connected to all the resources, evidence-based tips, and structural health education we drop every single week. This information is located in the description of our episode. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, we are still accepting listeners' mail. So feel free to comment on this episode, or for a more intimate or private conversation, you can email us at contact@kickcrampsas, which is also listed in the description of this episode. Now, before you drop off, leave a comment below. Can you now identify if your cyclical discomfort is primarily structural shedding or an inflammatory prostaglandin spasm? And what is one holistic infrastructure shift you are committing to this week? We cannot wait to read your responses. Gratitude to all of you for tuning in. We are so deeply honored to walk this path of absolute health sovereignty and biological authority alongside you. Stay mindful, protect your internal peace, keep learning, and keep moving. We manifest a positive, productive, and peaceful remainder of the day, week ahead, and menstrual cycle journey ahead. And we will be speaking to you during our next episode on next Menstruation Monday. Peace.